Welcome to the Learning Experience powered by CAST. I'm one of your hosts, Kelly Suding.
And I'm Luis Perez.
And I'm Brian Dean.
We are three educators here ready to break down barriers until learning has no limits. Let's do this. Hey, Brian Dean. I don't know about you, but I'm so excited about what's happening this week on the Learning Experience podcast.
I have to be honest with you, Kelly, I'm not. I'm just kidding. Of course, I'm excited. I'm always stoked. I'm stoked to be here and I'm stoked to be talking with you. And I'm stoked for this bonus episode. A bonus episode is one that we pull from deep within the UDL archives, the UDL library, the good that comes from that. And it's us sharing a interview from one of our colleagues. In this case, it's Allison Posey.
OMG. Can we talk about her for a second?
Come on. I could talk about her for an hour. Are you kidding me? She's like, I think she literally has sunshine running through her blood. I think that's it. I think
agree.
If she ever gets cut, it's just sunshine pouring out.
Exactly. And she's a leader in the field of UDL, and I feel privileged and honored to be one of her colleagues. So she's bringing us this interview this week. And who's she talking to this week?
Oh, today. So it is all star-studded this week. She will be doing an author talk with Jennifer Pusateri. Now, if you don't know Jennifer Pusateri, then you need to get hip to it right quick, because she is a leader in the UDL movement and the UDL community, and has been for a long time. Jennifer is out at the University of Kentucky, and there she works with the Center for Enhancement of Learning and Teaching, which is also known as CELT, C-E-L-T. And there she's working on advancements of accessibility and inclusive teaching practices across campuses. But she's also been a chair of the International UDL in Higher Ed SIG and Network, or the UDL-HE. She's presented at, I can't even count the number of conferences, UDL conferences she's been at. And presented at, always dropping knowledge bombs. And she's a member of the CAST National Faculty, and she's written an amazing book. I think it is transformational, because that's in the title. It's Transform Your Teaching with Universal Design for Learning, 6 Steps to Jumpstart Your Practice. And it is a page turner, a beach reader, just powerhouse of a book I've enjoyed. It's got practical examples in it. It's got easy to follow steps. It talks about your context of teaching. It's one of those books that you definitely need to read. It needs to be on your bookshelf.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, who doesn't need like 6 steps to jumpstart any parts of our practice, right? And she has those outlined for us. So I followed her work for many years, and I'm so excited that we have this opportunity to share with our listeners here at the Learning Experience podcast with the conversation with Allison Posey and Jen Pusateri.
That's right. So like I told you before, get your favorite beverage, kick your feet up, and buckle in, because you're in for a good time.
Here we go.
Thank you for joining us from wherever you are. This is our first Learning Through UDL Stories episode, and I am Allison Posey. I am so honored and thrilled to get to be here. Hopefully you can hear the excitement in my voice. We in this series are going to be exploring real-world application of universal design for learning, UDL. What does it look like, sound like, feel like, in all the different contexts around the world? And each episode will bring in expert voices from the UDL community to discuss strategies. And really, we're all here to try to create better learning experiences for every individual. So I am so thrilled, Jennifer, to be able to be joined by you for this first episode. And she is a longtime colleague and friend. So thank you so much for being here, Jennifer. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm delighted.
So your book,
Yes.
Transform Your Teaching with UDL, 6 Steps to Jumpstart Your Practice. It was released in 2022, just after the pandemic, and we were all working to get back to our routines. And I will just kind of give a little personal plug at the beginning. Your book is one of my favorites because it emphasizes the importance of 2 things that I think often gets missed with UDL, and that's the importance of time that it takes to change, and the shift in the mindset that has to happen. And you actually break that down and you make it so manageable and doable. And you really get into this, what I like to, I love the brain science, this idea of there being a critical period for teacher mindset. And this book For those of you listening, if you haven't read it, it has so many just really practical protocols and templates and sentence starters. And Jennifer models UDL in this book, in this print format, in such an incredible way. You've really helped educators break through so many of the common roadblocks that we face in implementing UDL and just have these practical strategies. Can you share, Jennifer, a little bit about your UDL journey and what inspired you again to just write this book and think that this approach was one that just had to get out there?
Yeah, man. So I actually I started teaching at a school in Louisville, Kentucky for students with specific learning disabilities. And that was actually my first real introduction to working with any students with disabilities. That's just not something that we did in my pre-service teacher programs. And so as I got to know these students and got to see them in my class, I taught arts and humanities. And so, a lot of these students were brilliant, creative, out of the box thinkers, just amazing students, and especially when it was in the arts. And so I got to see them at their best often. Whereas if they were in other classes where they were reading, many of the students were dyslexic. That's maybe an area where they struggled more, but I got to see them really shine, which was amazing. And so I already kind of had this idea from that work that, wow, there are students who just like the regular way school is presented to us doesn't work for them. And it's not anything the students are doing wrong. It's just that's just how the system is set up. And so that made a huge impact on me, of course. Then I transitioned over to the Kentucky Department of Education. And while I was there, I was asked to, and I quote, look into this thing called UDL, unquote. And so as I started reading one of the early books, and I can't remember which one it is. I don't think I even have it on my shelf. Oh, I do. Here it is. A Practical Reader in Universal Design for Learning, which is
Yes.
one of the older books. And as I was reading this book, I'm just highlighting the heck out of it and dog-earing it and putting notes to myself all over the place because I was like, this is what we did. Like, this is what we did in my school that I taught at. We were very cognizant of the fact that we were teaching students for whom the typical classroom doesn't work. And so we taught the way that our students learned best. And I'm like, this is it. Like, this is what we did. So I learned more about UDL. I immediately was like, I need to go to a conference, like right now, about this. And I came to, I think it was 2016 or 17. It was the second annual CAST UDL Symposium. And at that conference, it was like all of these things that I'd felt deep down as a teacher were the right things to do, but like had no backup for that. Like it was just what I thought. Being at this conference, I'm like hearing people say the things that I always felt were right and saying, yeah, that's actually backed up by research. And I was like, what? It was amazing. So I got home from that conference and I hit the ground running. I immediately put together a presentation for leadership at the Kentucky Department of Ed. And it was like, we need to have a pilot. Like, we need a pilot right now. We need this across the entire state of Kentucky right now. And just really jumped right in and continued coming to anything CAST put on, I was there. Like if there was a webinar, I was there. If there was a presenters academy, I was there. Like I was at all the things. I just absorbed it so quickly. UDL equals validation, and that is absolutely true. It was true for me as an educator, but honestly, I feel like it was even more true for me just as a human learner. Because when I got to where I could comprehend the framework. And I'm reading through all of these things and I'm thinking, like all of this stuff is the reason why I didn't do well in school because my teachers didn't know. Like they just didn't know, right? No one's going out on to try to deter students from learning, but like they just didn't know. But like if I had a teacher who was making sure things were relevant to me, who was giving me choice and autonomy, who was addressing the threats and distractions and biases and all of those things, like I would have done so much better. So for me, learning about UDL, it almost made me shift. Well, there's no almost. It made me shift the way I thought about myself as a learner. And it made me feel capable and like I could have done this because I kind of always grew up thinking, I just I'm not one of those, I'm not one of those smart kids. Like that's just not what I do. So anyway, it validated for me that me not doing really well in school was not 100% my fault. Like it wasn't all on me. And my gosh, that was a game changer, a game changer. And so I will just sort of skip ahead and say that made me want to join a master's degree program and then a PhD program. And now I've finished those things. And
I was
like,
gonna
and
say
now
you're really close to that PhD, right?
I'm done. I'm
You
donezo.
did it.
Woo! Yes.
Okay, okay. Amazing.
Yes. So yeah, so very powerful for me to learn those things. Yeah.
And so this idea, the shifting and thinking about how you thought about yourself, the way you thought about environments and school, you've now scaffolded folks to be able
Yeah.
to bring this to life in many different settings. So since the 2022 release of your book, do you have a favorite example of a way that UDL has been implemented that is kind of aligning with this dream, with what you felt and the way
Yeah.
you were experiencing the shift?
Yeah, for sure. So I went and worked with a school in Ohio, and it is called Southwestern Career Academy. Shout out Southwestern Career Academy. I'm actually meeting with one of their directors later today, so I'm going to totally tell them I shouted them out. But this is a school that it's a career and technical school, but in a high school setting. And they have, I can't remember how many different languages they said were spoken just within their school, but a lot of different languages. And so they have decided to focus in on certain things, UDL being one of those. But one example is that were looking at the language and symbols, and they're like, okay, so we got to clarify the vocabulary, language, and symbols. But like, we have, I'm just going to make a number up, 24 different languages or whatever. Like, how do we do that? And so they really started with Latin and Greek root words. And they spent like an entire year focusing on these root words because those carry over into many different languages. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. And so they saw a lot of success from that and are continuing to move forward. And now they're looking for other ways that they can implement parts of UDL in the work that they're doing. So that's pretty cool.
It's so cool. And what a challenge.
Mm,
What Jennifer, I think, has just shared in that moment, I'm going to just take a moment and kind of deconstruct it a little bit through
please, yes.
the lens, is there was a problem of practice. There was something this CTE site, Southwest Careers Academy, that they were trying to figure out and get their head around. So
Yeah.
we never just implement UDL to implement UDL. We implement UDL to try to address a problem that we're trying to solve. And UDL is the toolbox to be able to do that. So then you shared the way some of the concrete actionable steps that they took. And the steps we all take will be different. So it doesn't mean we all need to go do exactly what this school did,
Right.
but we will then, depending on our problem of practice, use the UDL guidelines as a tool really to figure out where
Yeah.
we want to zoom in. And then I so appreciate that you noted, here's the data, here's the evidence of impact, here's how it was changing the experience, the learning for the students. That is the UDL cycle. So I just wanted to kind of give a shout out to that. And you're getting another shout out for the PhD, Dr.
Thanks.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So these kind of examples, I think, are the ones that keep us fired up, that keep us
Mm.
wanting to continue to go. And so, are there other? So you have 6 steps, and you're focused on mindset that really help educators to create these learning experiences for educators. And how have you found it really to impact student motivation and engagement? That's so often one of those problems of practice that we're wrestling with as educators. It might be one individual student in a classroom, or it might be more broadly across, the high school or the middle school, the elementary school.
Right.
So do you have any thoughts or suggestions or evidence around UDL and motivation and engagement?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any official, like, published evidence, but I will say that in the pilot program that I did in the state of Kentucky while I was at the Department of Ed, it was with a middle school, and I worked with, I think it was six teachers. Um, over the course of a year, learning about UDL, implementing UDL, et cetera. And at the end, they all took a survey, the educators took a survey and talked about all kinds of stuff. But one of the things I asked them about was, which of these areas have you seen improvement in the most? And the one that they all said, they all agreed, engagement has gone up quite a bit. And I think, some of that is, as we know, it's related to brain science. I mean, like that's that's how that works, right? Like if you're talking about a thing or you're trying to relate to me, make it relevant to me, or you're giving me options, or you're letting me work together with other students in a collaborative way, like those things are going to increase engagement. Like that's just how it works. So that's one example. And I will just say, like for myself personally, if you're doing any of those things, then I'm going to be more engaged. Like I just am. And I'm thinking back even to my attendance at the first couple of UDL conferences I went to. Allison Posey tended to open up those conferences.
Who
And
is
she would
that?
always do this crazy, she would do this activity or some kind of an activity that would ask us all to really think about like, why are we here? What are we wanting to get out of this? What are our goals? And at first I was like, oh my God, goals. That's the last thing I want to talk about. Goals, really? Is that what we're doing?
I still say
Then
those all the time, and people
no,
still respond that way.
I know. And so, right,
Yes.
same. And so, but as I did it, I was like, oh, I mean, no one has ever asked me that at a conference before. You just go to a conference because you go to a conference. But like, what do I really want to get out of this? Well, I really want to take this back to the state of Kentucky and like blow this up is what I want to do. And then that set my thinking for the rest of that conference on like, okay, now I'm looking out for the things I want to do and the things I want to learn and things I want to take back to the state of Kentucky. So thank you, Allison, for asking us to consider our goals, even though I didn't want to do it.
And even my kids roll their eyes, but I'm like, no,
Yeah,
it's good for you.
that's right. That's
It
right.
is.
We don't have to.
Yeah. Well, your note there, I'm so it once you set a goal, your nervous system is goal directed. So it
Right.
literally you start to pay attention. So around UDL and standardized assessments. So if the problem of practice you're trying to think about are standardized assessments,
Mm,
that's what you would then plug in to say, okay, you would use Jen's book and you
sure.
start to think about the 6 steps and you would connect all of those to standardized assessments. So that's not what Jennifer was doing when she was using the in the collaboration with Southwest Careers Academy. Not that they're not looking at assessments, of course they are, but that wasn't
Mm,
the problem and the data that they were working on with UDL. So if you want to start with standardized assessments, go for it. Gather your data, find out where there are barriers, use UDL to intentionally design to get at success in those standardized assessments, and then look at the data. Great problem of practice to think about. So jump into that a little bit. Getting back a little bit to, I guess that leads to my next question, which is just, we're often, what can we do Monday morning? What can we do
yeah.
tomorrow? Do you have a tip for us? Do you have a suggestion? Because one of the things I love in your book, and I will just share with you all, Jennifer has a get in shape with UDL, recognizing it's very much like we would want to change our eating habits or our exercise habits. It takes time. And she has even 18-week schedules to be able, I mean, this book
Sure.
is so thoughtful of the mindfulness. So get in shape with UDL, but if there was something that we could use tomorrow, do you have a favorite one of those from your work that you've been doing?
Oh gosh. Well, I think the easiest thing to do is to think about it in that plus one way. So one of the planning approaches in the book talks about this plus one idea, meaning that, okay, if you want to think about offering choices, and let's just say that you have not really offered a lot of choice so far as an educator, but you want to do that. It's like, okay, so me going from absolutely no choices at all to you can write a paper and you can make a poster and you can do an interpretive dance and you can make a beautiful piece of art. That's like way too much.
Too much.
And I'm not going to do that, right? Like I'm not, that's too much. I'm not going to go from here to there, but I can add one thing. So I can say, all right, if I've always had students take an exam, maybe I can add one thing to that. So perhaps I can have them take either an exam or if they want to write a paper, let's say, instead. That's great. You have that choice now. And you can start there. Like you can literally start by adding one thing. And it doesn't have to be all of the things. I've actually started using this analogy a lot when I go out and talk to folks about UDL. So my dad he was a retired middle school science teacher. And he, along the way in the summers, he had a crew of other teachers who in the summer would do construction projects. And they worked together as a construction crew. So this man can build anything, anything at all. Um, and he has a massive amount of tools. I'm like fills the entire back of a pickup truck. Plus, there's like that much also still in the barn, right? Like there's just a lot. But like he didn't go to Lowe's one day and buy all the tools, right? Like he bought the tools as he needed them for a project. And so now, like he can Pretty much. He pretty much has any tool that he needs, unless it's some really weird specialty item or whatever. But like he has the things he needs and he knows how to use those because he picked them up along the way, like along with whatever project he was working on. And I think that's a fantastic way to think about UDL. Like this is a toolbox. This is a toolbox. Does that mean we do all of these things all the time? No. Like, why would he bring plumbing equipment to a drywall job, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So you can pick a thing first and start with that thing. Pick the thing that's absolutely wearing you out or upsetting you or making you feel like you're not doing a great job as a teacher. Pick that thing. Start with that and find some way using the framework to hone in on that.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Depending on the tool you need that day for the job, that's what you're going to
Right.
bring. You're
Right.
not going to bring all the tools. You might bring a couple backup in
Yep.
case the wrench doesn't work or something. It's so good. It's so good. And that makes it not so overwhelming, just
Agreed.
noting that it can be overwhelming. And I have never heard that tool analogy and I love it. I often will use
Mm,
the closet one where all of the different considerations in the guidelines are like different articles of clothing and
mm,
they're
yeah.
sorted the way they're sorted. You would never wear all of your clothes when you're
Right.
going out. You always let the goal. But I love this and how it grows and builds over time. And when a new tool comes out, you're going to use the latest tool. You're going to
Right.
update some of that, and you're never done. This is why teaching is hard and emotional work is that it's never done. And there's another question in here that I just want to note because I think it's a really good one, and we hear it a lot. I'm sure you've heard it a lot. Is how do we know that UDL isn't giving up on the rigor?
Mm. That's a great question. And honestly, I mean, I work at a university, like I get that question a lot. And my first response to that is, well, what do you mean by rigor? Like, let's start there. What does rigor mean to you individually as a person? Does that mean that it's more? Like, does that mean we're doing more work? Does that mean that we are having to do all these other extra pieces, these extraneous pieces that are not actually helping you learn the thing, but are just things like finding a document on Canvas or whatever, like, or finding it on your Google Classroom, even like those aren't the actual learning. So when you're thinking about rigor, I've actually found that UDL allows you to raise your rigor a little bit here and there because when you're taking all of those extraneous barriers out of the way, like now they can get to the actual thing. So instead of spending all their cognitive energy or cognitive load on trying to find the thing, on making sure that they're doing this and this and this in this order, even though they have a really hard time with multiple steps, instead of doing that, they're focusing on learning the thing. And like that's what I really want them to be doing. So I think you can actually do more rigorous work in that way.
I love that, Jennifer. And I actually agree 100%. Sometimes I worry that we conflate rigor with not really teaching and not really supporting. My
Hmm.
class is rigorous. You need to do all of this. Good luck out there. And we know who's
Right.
going to do well, right? If you have access to a tutor or you've had previous experience
Hmm.
or you know someone in the class and you have a buddy. I mean, all the different things that help us to get through those challenges. We are not going to lower what we want students to know, do, and care about. Those are the
Yep.
goals, right? And then we are providing the flexible ways to get there.
And I
Um,
just had a random thought that
good. I
we're
love those.
hopefully will not take us off track. But what I was just thinking about the fact that educational trauma is real. And I saw a lot of that as a teacher of students with learning disabilities that came to us from a lot. They've already been at several schools before they came to my school. Um, and I'm wondering how much educational trauma is related to rigor and like this constant need for rigor. I'm not saying that rigorous work makes a traumatic situation, but I think some of that overlaps. Okay, random thought, done.
No, but something you said at the beginning gave me goosebumps because it connected with me where you felt like you weren't one of, I'm not going to say it exactly but you felt like you weren't one of the smart ones in
Right.
school. And that breaks my heart because I don't know one human that doesn't have smartness. I don't.
Sure.
But sometimes it's not what we value in school, which tends to be reading and writing. Let's
Mm.
admit it. It tends to be very limited in terms of what it is. And when we open that up and recognize all the different ways of knowing and doing, it really can shift that feeling of being in a space and then your motivation to want to keep going. So I think
Right.
your random comment was actually so beautifully connected to what you were sharing at the beginning. UDL
Yeah.
assessments, how do we tackle that? Whether you're international baccalaureate, whether you're at a university or you're working for state exams or your own classroom exam. We're thinking about assessments broadly here. Uh,
Yeah. Well, a question I get a lot whenever I go out and work with, especially K-12 schools, is how can I give them choices all the time when they have to take assignment an assessment that is all the same for everybody? And the response I've started giving is that I would much rather my students have a year of really accessible, approachable teaching before they get to an inaccessible test than not have that before they get to an inaccessible test. Like, you're right. No, we can't give them a choice on a state assessment. We just can't. But we can make sure that everything up to that point is really solid and is really using our brains in the way that they're designed to learn. And then thinking about just general assessment, not necessarily state assessment or anything of that nature. I often talk to faculty about things like, okay, so what's the goal of this assignment? Obviously, we start with a goal. What are you wanting students to leave this being able to know, understand, or do? And so we start there. And then we talk about how have you usually done this in the past? And so they would say something like a paper or an exam or whatever, a presentation. And then we talk about, is there any other possible way that a student might be able to show you that they know the same things that they could show you in a paper, let's say? Is there any other possible way? And so sometimes people are like, no, absolutely not. And I'm like, oh, all right, well, I mean, there probably is, but okay. Um, but then I think about, are there other ways that we could get that same information that's not that thing? And so if the answer is yes, then we try to think about, okay, great. Let's look at what the actual goal is, and let's remove all of the things that could get in the way of the barriers that could get in the way from not having an option. And that seems to be useful. I actually have a workshop that I have done a couple times that is using like, how can I give options but have the same rubric? Like, that's a whole thing that people are like, how am I supposed to grade this? Faculty get very concerned about that as well. Like, how do I grade this in an equitable way? Like, because honestly, I believe that papers are a better way of showing the understanding than, this other thing. So, but there really are some pretty simple ways to think about that and to create one rubric that you can use for lots of formats, which is great because I'm not trying to make five rubrics if I have five different choices. So there are ways
exactly.
to do that. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. One rubric. Know what you want to
One rubric
get to, and then find the different ways to get there. It's so
for
good.
sure.
Is there a way, since you we just went through school yourself, was
Mhm.
there a certain way UDL helped you in your studying and your
Oh my
prep for your
gosh.
PhD? Do you have a
For
favorite one?
sure. Well, it's funny because now that I know about UDL, I know to look out for these things. And so I know that, like, if I'm thinking about building knowledge, honestly, I'm not a reader, you all. Like, I can literally read, but I actually have some suspicion that I might be dyslexic. But I can read a thing and not remember anything about the thing I read. I've read this biography of Ulysses S. Grant three times now, and it's like 800 pages. I read this three times, and I remember some of it, but not, anyway, that's just not how I learn best. So I know that for me, if I'm going to have to read a thing, then I'm going to have to make notes in the margins, which is one of the things I have in the book, and it's actually a picture of Allison's book, which is all
Ah,
dog-eared and like I have
right.
to go through and make
I love
notes to
that picture that
myself.
we had in,
Yeah, it's also in the book.
in your
Um,
book.
and so like because I have know the guidelines really well now, I know that that's a thing I need, and that helps me to be. And I honestly, I think learning about UDL is what helped me think I could actually attempt a PhD and end up actually doing that thing, because I knew so much about how the brain works. It just taught me so much about myself, honestly.
Look at the rigor that UDL helped you to get to. Also,
That's right.
since we
Well,
talked
that's
about.
what I was, while you were talking, that's what I was thinking. Like, well, I don't like to write a paper, but I can write a paper if it's about a thing I like or am interested in. Like,
There.
it shifts the whole thing.
That
Yeah.
surprises UDL so well. There's one quick question. It's going to be a 30-second answer.
Okay.
So I'm really
Ready.
challenge you. When you have rolled this out in districts and schools, do you think it's best to do it district-wide or start with a few pilot teachers, maybe at a specific grade level?
Pilot teachers.
All right, look at that quick answer.
100%.
Okay.
Because you gotta have that buy-in, and like who else are they gonna listen to than the other teachers in their building who teach the same kids they teach? Like it's totally different. Like it's totally different.
So good. Jennifer, I love getting to talk to you whenever I get to or communicate in
Same.
any of the means that we do.
That's right.
Thank you for sharing these insights today, really helping us think about UDL in new and really exciting ways. I don't know about you all, but I want to go do something now. I'm ready. Go to her website. You will get everything you want
Wow.
and need from her website. You're amazing, Jennifer. I don't know if you have any last word, but I just want to thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, just do it. Just do it. Just do it for the kids. I mean, it's a life-changing situation, I think. So do it.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Learning Experience powered by CAST. You can find us on the web at cast.org. That's CAST.org. There, you'll find the show notes with links to all of the resources mentioned on each episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving a review and share it with your colleagues so that together we can build more inclusive learning experiences for everyone. Thanks again for listening.